Once we discover we're both autistic and ADHD, it feels like we've unlocked the key to everything. But then comes the real question. How do we actually use this key? I'm Adria Sophia Melikar, an AuDHD coach who's walked this path myself. I've spent over a decade helping hundreds who don't fit the mold to find their own way forward. On AuDHD Sparks, we're reimagining what's possible when we stop forcing ourselves to be who we're not and start doing life differently in ways that leave us feeling resourced and alive. Welcome to AuDHD Sparks and our 10th episode, which feels like a milestone, which fits right in with what we are talking about today in today's episode. You know how you can focus on a goal or an accomplishment and you're like doing everything you can to get to that point, but then that point happens, the accomplishment happens, the milestone happens, it's there, the moment passes, and then you just keep going on in life. So maybe this is getting your master's degree or becoming a mother or securing that promotion, getting your black belt in karate, I don't know. Or like me, releasing a new podcast baby into the world. Whatever that might be, that is what we are talking about today. And I forgot to say, my name is Adria, your host. You may know that by now if you've been with me for, a few episodes. Hi, so nice to see you, or I guess hear you. Nope, neither of those. So nice to be with you again, I guess I should say. And if you're new, welcome. I'm recording this as I'm in that kind of transition portal as I get ready to travel, to have a couple weeks in our camper van for my partner and my birthdays, and going up to Oregon, which is kind of a second, I don't know, we kind of bounce back and forth between the two. Home base in Las Vegas, spending time in Portland where my partner has his business headquarters. So anyway, we're about to hop in and kind of like in that transition portal as I record this. I've got stuff batched and ready for releasing while I'm gone, so there's not going to be any break in anything. I got you covered. But, that transition energy, which maybe we'll talk about that in another episode at some point. But that is not what we're talking about today. So let's talk about those milestones that we so easily bypass. So when I released this podcast, which if you listen to the first episode, you know that this is my second podcast. I had a podcast that I had for about a decade. I still have it. It evolved in many ways, but when I released this show, I really felt the desire to start something fresh and new, like build something from the ground up again, birth something in a way. It was like this creative inspiration and excitement around it. And then release week came, and I ended up during that release week, I brought home this Hoya. So I'm a plant person. One of my big special interests is plants. And so in my home, I only have like one really bright window. Hoyas really thrive when they got a lot of bright light. They can kind of sustain at lower light, but they like put on flowers and growth and all of that. And so I kind of like have this one window section that's like my Hoya corner. And I have to like control myself to not bring in too many because there won't be like an ideal spot for them in the house. So bringing one in was a big deal. And I was like, I'm going to get one to celebrate the release of the podcast. And, this feels really special. And so I went and I got it. I brought it home and I realized that I thought I was getting it to celebrate, but turned out it was really kind of embodying the achievement, the milestone, because these physical anchors, are markers like the Hoya was for me, can be really powerful and helpful for us for these digital achievements, like invisible, right? The podcast release was like an invisible thing. The Hoya made it tangible. It made that invisible visible. The Hoya essentially made it real for me. And it's such an interesting thing, but it's like the ADHD part of us like moves past milestones without integrating them. It's like so easy for us to just keep going, right? And then the autistic part struggles with the abstract. And so as AuDHDers, it can be really helpful to have these concrete markers for milestones, because our brains really can struggle to make invisible accomplishments actually feel real. And it's not just about, oh, we need to make them feel real. There's a reason. There's always a reason for everything. When it doesn't feel real, we tend to not integrate that into our self-view, right? So this accomplishment, this milestone, this thing that you did, kind of passes right by, and it's almost like you forget that it happened and you don't recognize yourself for it. You don't like think of yourself as the black belt or the or the person with the degree or the experience or this credential or XYZ, whatever it might be. It's easy for us to start to undersell ourselves and kind of like not hold the confidence in our abilities because we haven't like integrated that into our like awareness of like, no, this is me. This is part of, how I am in the world, what I've brought to the world, how I'm showing up, like all those pieces. And maybe that's not the case all the time because, if you're a mom, then, probably like every day you remember you're a mom. But in a way, like there's a concrete reminder, right? Like that is not so abstract. But other things may be a lot more abstract. So yeah. And then this idea of like following from that, it's like us not sharing our greatness, maybe missing opportunities because we're not like telling other people, or we're not, like being in it and making it solid for ourselves. So it, like things that might come off of us, like sharing that achievement or like being like, yes, I am a speaker. And so then people are like, oh, she's a speaker, so let me send her some speaker opportunities, that kind of thing. And, if we're doing meaningful work, which I think a lot of us are drawn to do meaningful things, whether it's in our paid work or whether it's in our home life or personal life or volunteering, like whatever it might be, there's that paradox of doing meaningful work that then can kind of feel meaningless, right? Because it's like, did it even happen? And so today we're talking about what we really need when we accomplish something meaningful or like a milestone like this. So how do you make accomplishments feel real? So one of the things when I used to run this group coaching program, I did it for several years, and the final week of our program, I would always make about celebration and acknowledgments for ourselves. So self-acknowledgement, self-celebration, like what are the shifts we had? What did we accomplish? Anything big or small, having my clients who were in the program kind of write out what, like kind of doing like a little inventory of like, what are all those things? And it could be very internal. Like I feel more confident about this, or I shifted my perspective around this, or I no longer feel the same level of, shame around XYZ, but it also might be the things we typically think of that are like external, tangible accomplishments. Like I shared XYZ posts, or I, like things that we can put a number to, or we can, that kind of thing. But still they're probably not tangible unless it's like, I knit a sweater. They may still not, even though they're tangible in we can document them. We can like write them on a list of like this exact number or whatever it is. They're not tangible in the way that we can hold them, feel them, see them still. And so I had them kind of write this out, and anything small or big, all the things, because sometimes the small things we don't acknowledge, we don't see as actual accomplishments or achievements. And so those can be some of the most important things, right? It's easy to then breeze right by that as well. So yeah, that's like some of the, like, that's how important that is. And that is also something that you can do as well if it sparks for you. When, you get through, like I used to do this at the end of each year, like a little debrief with myself, for my business specifically, but for my, really for my leadership, I guess, for my voice, for, how I was showing up in the world. And I would kind of like, like do a little bit of a list of like, what was I acknowledging myself for from that year? What did I achieve? Like, what were the milestones? What were the trackable metrics of things? And like, how did I shift? Like, how am I feeling different now, in this new year than I did the last year? And I can go back and look at my notes and that kind of stuff, because I'm nerdy like that. I love getting to look at that data around myself and understand myself better and recognize where I'm at. And so, yeah, those are all possible sparks. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that feeling of like, did this even happen? Which we can call achievement deflation. It's a great term. So when I released the podcast, I had done this 3-week creative sprint up to releasing it. So I had spent a year kind of creating content and doing things for a separate podcast that I thought I was going to be releasing that had a co-host. But then kind of right before that release time, things completed with that, ended, and kind of did a spur of the moment, spur of the energy pivot and recognized like, oh, I feel like this solo show, and I'm used to doing solo shows. So like, I feel like this is like really calling to be birthed, to be called forward. And so I feel like maybe I can release it around the same time. This is like so hyper-focused, like energy here, right? I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to do all the things, but just do it in a few weeks. And I did. And it was great. And it was this push of energy, creative high, like this creative sprint, like I said, and then hitting that release week and going straight into maintenance mode. And straight into like, instead of designing artwork and messaging and creating an intro and finding music for it and like all of these, creating like, a base amount of episodes that would go live and setting up all the pieces, syndicating the show in all the places. Like instead of all of those pieces, which, were exciting for my like ADHD side, right? Like they were the creation, they were the starting, they were the, dopamine stuff. Suddenly it was like, okay, just releasing an episode each week. Like, okay, now just make sure you have an episode to release each week. And it was like this maintenance, which can feel so hard because it's neither urgent nor exciting. And it felt anticlimactic. Like I found myself a little bit down and deflated. Also, like I specifically didn't do a big launch. I didn't do a launch party or an event or like really, like I sent it to my email list and like told some friends I'm in community with and maybe did a post on Instagram, but I didn't do like a big push. I just did these like, I'm going to let people know about this. I didn't like, yeah, it's different than maybe what I would have done in the past as a business owner who has a lot of marketing background and knows all of the best practices. I was like, no best practices for me. I'm going to do what feels good. And so I'm just going to like gently release it into the world. And so with that too, that like added to that kind of achievement deflation. Like, did anything even happen? Like, what's going on? Is this even real? And that first week, when, since I wasn't even really sharing it that much, in the first week I hadn't even shared it with like my circle of friends. I just shared with a couple people, and they hadn't necessarily had time to listen yet. And so I was like in the void of, totally in that, did this even happen place? As podcasting, there can be like a separation between you guys as the listeners and me as the host, where there's not a direct place for you to leave comments or for like me to know what you're thinking or how this is feeling or if it's resonating, right? You can go to Instagram, like, and say hi or whatever, share, like, but that's like an extra step. And so there's just not as much connection between those pieces. So it can feel like a void. So, side notes there, but okay, total soapbox side note here. I'll say when I'm recording, I feel connected to you, even though we don't have a direct, immediate, feedback loop where I can hear you and you can tell me like, if you're like into this or if you're like release another episode or you're like, I hate this. I feel like I'm connected to you. It's like one of the things I love about these solo episodes is like, I can speak and feel like I'm speaking to you. Okay. that's a total side note. So I didn't do the big launch party. There wasn't this, whatever big hoopla, because that felt hard. That felt overwhelming. It felt like a demand. It felt like something I would have done in the past in my business that I'm trying to like unhook from, like those standard ways of doing podcasts, doing business, and find my own sustainable kind of AuDHD way to release the show. And so energy wise, it did feel really good. And I didn't feel like I was pushing. I didn't feel like I was trying to do anything. I felt like I was like sharing my thing, my baby into the world in like a lovely, gentle way. And that was really, really my intention. And that was good. And I want to say too, like my favorite way to celebrate my birthday over the past few years, as I've been kind of like recognizing my neurotype and exploring like what actually does feel good, as I've probably been in like perimenopause, which adds this whole extra dimension. Like my favorite way to celebrate my birthday the last few years has been to have a spa day, like to be alone. And like sometimes like I will have my mom come to the spa day, but we'll each get our own massages and we, hang out maybe in the sauna and be quiet, but there's just something about that like peace and the stillness. And so I used to in the past maybe have a birthday party, have things happening, and that just doesn't, maybe it didn't even feel good then. I don't know, but like, it just doesn't feel good in this time for me. And so like that typical party celebration thing just doesn't fit. And that might be the case for some AuDHDers as well, where it's like maybe it's overstimulating. It feels like a lot of pressure and executive function to pull something together when it's supposed to be your birthday and like all that stuff. And so we can start to build these like self-witnessing skills. Like, okay, so if the typical party and celebration doesn't quite fit, like how do I witness myself? I know one lovely person who was an AuDHDer that I'm friends with, like for each of her birthdays, she would go to like her favorite bookstore and like a coffee shop that was next door and have like sip her tea and like go browse books. And that just felt so lovely. I was like, ooh, yeah. super I feel like the super autistic way to spend a birthday, maybe, I don't know, but it sounds nice. And so like recognizing these things of what does feel, and maybe for you, that ADHD side is like, I really want people around me and I want to feel like I'm celebrating. Like used to love going out dancing and just like being in the music and the energy and moving my body like nobody was watching. Yeah. And so maybe that's like what feels good. So whatever that is for you, right? So what are those typical ways that feel good and right for you to celebrate things? Maybe that's something to think about too when we're thinking of milestones that could be integrated. And in circles I'm in, it's pretty, normal to kind of create rituals around big moments in our lives. I'm in some kind of more like earthy, witchy, folk culture, ancestral, like, connection, spaces. And so I realized that I had been so focused on getting to the milestone, and granted it was like a creative push or like a creative sprint. And so, when I was in that sprint, I really wasn't thinking about like when I get there, I was thinking about like, let me just get there. So I had been so in that, that I forgot that this was a big moment, that this was a birth, that this was, something important to me. And I was letting it pass right by without acknowledging it. And it's interesting. Yeah. Like I think I kind of have an animist viewpoint around the world in general. So I think of this podcast is not mine. It's something I'm like co-creating with the soul of the show, if that makes sense. And so it's like it's almost like I owe it to the show to like, to be intentional in this moment and to honor it and be like, something happened here, and maybe like the things, your milestones, maybe you don't think of them so much as like, there's a soul there that you want to acknowledge, but it's still that sense of like, what is that ritual? What is that rite of passage in a way, right? Like when I got divorced, there was a rite of passage, and several of my female friends got together with me. We went out dancing together. One of my friends gave me this like paper cape that she made, that everyone signed, and like gave me a copy of The Paper Bag Princess by Robert Munsch. I don't know if you're a child of the 80s, and I don't know if it was a Canadian thing or not, but such a cute book. And so I had like these different, important to me, like these ideas. And so that was kind of like a ritual, right? Like that was like this rite of passage ritual. And I think like there probably have been, obviously like a wedding is an obvious example of that. A baby shower, like there's certain things, right? It's kind of like the last episode we did where we talked about, like the compassion slots, like the automatic compassion slots or categories that things are in, right? So there might be like specific celebration categories, right? But then you might do things that are outside of that, or that you wouldn't think, is something you want to acknowledge, right? Like when I got my tattoo, it was like there was almost getting the tattoo actually itself, now that I'm thinking about this, was totally what we're talking about here, because I got it when I turned 40, and it was like my tattoo is kind of like plants, surprise, surprise. But there's like roots that are attached, and the plants that are used, one of them is creosote, which is kind of like the desert, big main species when you're out in lower elevations, which is where I grew up and where I live. And it feels like my roots, it feels connected. And then I have a prairie grass for like the Canadian prairies, where like my more recent ancestors are from, where my parents and my sister and everyone was born. And then also kind of like as a reference to Ukraine, which is like my further back ancestors. And so there was like this intentionality around turning 40, and these are my roots. This feels really important to me. I want to feel grounded. I want to feel like this plant is like going down my arm, and then the roots are there, and they're like almost like pulling my shoulders back, like anchoring me into the ground. I feel connected into the soil, like this almost like kind of sacred thing. And so getting this tattoo was literally, it was that making something that is like intangible, tangible, right? Like I can see my tattoo, I can feel it, I see it in the mirror all the time. And it's a connection to that like recognition and a reminder of like this connection I have to my roots, my ancestors, and that is like part of my spirituality. It's like how I feel more present and grounded. So yeah, so that like that action really was, part of making that real. And I didn't think about that until I was talking to you right now. So glad I thought of that as an example. That could definitely be one way that's way a lot of people use to make something real and tangible, right? Like some milestone or something that they want to remember, or they want to make, feel real, that they're always seeing, right? I want to get something on my forearm that when I look down, it reminds me to kind of breathe and feel like, okay, I'm here right now, like a quail or a teacup. For me, those things are very soothing. Maybe not for everybody, but yeah, so you get the idea of that. And so, yeah, so for going back to the podcast release, like I was craving this ritual around it. I was craving this kind of meaning making, right? This is what we're doing. It's like, we're making meaning out of it. But it can be a struggle to actually, for me, it's like to act out a whole ritual, especially if I'm doing it alone. Like if I magically had friends who were in person or online, I guess, and wanted to kind of like create a ceremony for me or with me, like awesome. But if I'm like doing it alone, if there's a lot of steps to something, it can just not happen because executive function. And it's hard to initiate also for me alone. And then getting other people involved can feel just as hard and all of that. So for me, like who has a tendency to overcomplicate things, and then when things are more complex than just like one step, it just feels impossible. Simple ways are good. So what are those simple ways? What are those simple ways to acknowledge this moment, to acknowledge this milestone, to make it feel real? So some of the other things are like jewelry that you wear as a reminder of something, an object that you place on your bookshelf or your altar, photo documentation, like scrapbooking, things like that, written reflections or journal entries. Or they could be simple ceremonies or rituals that you create for yourself, and they could be really easy. They could be like lighting a candle. So each time you look and you see that candle that day, you remember that something happened. Listening to a specific song when these things happen in your life, when you have these milestones, so that you're remembering like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So things like that can be how you're like making it real. Okay, question number 2. What is something you've done lately to mark a milestone that others might think is weird? Okay, so this one's a little bit different. Like we've been talking about like big milestones, or not even big, but like significant milestones in our lives, right? Well, this is maybe not as much that, but maybe it's like a special interest milestone, I guess I should say. So I have this running list of all the plant species that are in my house. So each time I bring a new plant home, I add it to the list. And that makes it feel real, and it doesn't just get lost. I mean, obviously I can see the plants still, right? But there's something about having it in my list. It's like, it's like a special neurodivergent pleasure, I guess. There's like the endorphin hit of like the newness that doesn't just wear off, right? Because it's like I can look at my list each time and feel an endorphin hit. I'm like, ooh. It doesn't end up feeling like nothing happens. And then it's been recorded, and I can like look at my list. I can see it growing. My ADHD and my autistic parts are like satisfied, and they're like kind of working together there, you know? And another thing that I want to do that I haven't done yet, and as I was like writing this, or not writing anything, but like jotting out bullet points for things that I wanted to like remember to mention in this episode, it came to me, and I was like, oh yeah, you have not done that yet, and you've been in this house for 9 months now. I want to mark the milestone of moving into this house by connecting with the domovik of the house, which is kind of like in Ukrainian folk culture. It's like, it's kind of like Dobby the house elf, you know, like in Harry Potter, but more spiritual, and it's kind of like the spirit of the hearth and the ancestor, the home, and a tradition is to kind of welcome them in, give an offering to them. And there have just been so many house projects that I got pulled into living here as we've been really restructuring the house to work for us, for our neurotypes, for like, you know, like basically designing our environment, like really very much literally. So it's just kind of slipped away. But I want to take a moment to kind of step back and do this, to create an altar, an offering, so I can feel present to this moment, to living here. And like, if, you know, I have an altar and I see it there, or an offering, like there, it's kind of that remembering each time I see it. And I don't think it's too late. And I think that that's a really important thing to recognize too, is that if you had a milestone and it already happened, maybe now is the time to use that and to, you know, find that thing that is going to help you make it real, help you acknowledge this milestone, put ritual to it, put awareness around it, integrate it for yourself, you know? Even if it was like a year ago, maybe it's not too late. My tattoo took a while. So I think I was still 40 when I got it, but it was definitely not on my birthday. It was like several months later. So just recognizing it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be a specific way. It can be imperfectly messy. And the point is having meaning for you and making things solid and real for you. I also really want to put an altar to the seasons in my house, which is kind of wild that I haven't even done this yet. So there's like this changing out of the elements in it each season. And there's this physical sense of where we are in space and time. Like if I'm walking by and I see like some grass stalks and, you know, it feels like, oh, it's fall, or like, or you know, fall leaves, or whatever it might be. Yeah. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you. So what is sparking for you from this episode? Take a second to be present to one thing that maybe is bubbling up. I know we've got the working memory challenges sometimes for some of us, especially me. So maybe there's something bubbling up. And if you need reminders, you can check out the show notes over at AuDHDsparks.com and share your sparks with me on Instagram at AuDHDsparks. I would love to hear about them. And what is landing for me from this whole conversation is how powerful anchors in the physical world can be for us. And even just listening to music or seeing an object or putting something in writing. And also how with like executive function challenges that, need to have simple ideas and low barrier to entry ways to do this and to not feel like it has to be a hard thing in order to do it. Like, what is the thing that feels doable for you and your brain and your, ways of doing things? Like we each kind of maybe have different things that feel easier. And so what is that? What is that for you? And what is a milestone that is coming up or that has happened that you want to acknowledge yourself for and that you want to make real? And how do you want to make it real? Okay. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of AuDHD Sparks. If this episode helped you, share it with another AuDHDer. And you can find out more about working with me at adriasophia.com/AuDHD. All right. Talk to you in the next episode.